Weapon Rogue as opposed to the Secret Rogue, which has a good
Ah,
matchup
okay.
against Druid, and a slightly poorer one against Warrior, in my opinion.
I think I agree with you there. Yeah, you are running into, I guess, the fear of going up against the aggro matchups then, because you have to bear in mind you don't always face this exact lineup from Alutemu. You have to have contingency plans for if you're up against the super aggro lineups with Face Hunter or whatever, against which I feel Weapon Rogue is a bit too clunky. They really don't want to be sinking any damage into minions whatsoever. They just want to be purely going face. But in the way this is shaken out for Flurry, I absolutely agree that Weapon Rogue would complement his lineup a little bit better.
In Alutemu's lineup, instead of Rogue, he has Mage, but other than that, we do have very, very similar classes. Just goes to show how much the meta has settled, but we are starting off with a good old Soul Demon Hunter mirror, and whenever I tuned into Americas, I just hear TJ and Dan arguing about whether this matchup is actually skill-based or not.
I think it's very skill-based. I think all of Soul Demon Hunter's matchups are. It is an easy deck when we're sitting here in the casting chair to critique the players and say, oh, they should have played more aggro, oh, they should have played more defensively, whatever, which I will continue to do, by the way. But when you're actually sat in the chair and playing it yourself, it becomes a lot more difficult to correctly analyze when the switching point is, when you go from defensive to aggression, when you draw cards, when you're shuffling in soul fragments. There's so many moving parts in the deck that even in the mirror, I think there's a lot of edge to be gained.
I agree. I like the matchup, even though I understand TJ dislikes how explosively it can go and how it can just come down to swinging face every single time. But there are instances where you do take some good trades or switch to a defensive mode, which I think makes it a little bit complicated. Like here, Flurry going for Kayn Sun Fury for the value trade, saying that you do not have a weapon equipped at the moment, so this is not a good Blade Dance. Also, he did not have any fragments shuffled in the deck, so it's not a good Shatter Shard Mist.
Quite. But now this is kind of a weird spot, I suppose, for both of our players, but mainly for Alutemu here, because he doesn't have a very aggressive hand at all. There's very, very little that this hand can do in terms of just pointing everything to the face. And so my first instinct is, I guess, to say try and set up Sociologist Militia, but he doesn't have any way to shuffle soul fragments into the deck either.
Right. Which is why I'm looking at the Mana Feeder this turn. You're essentially using your hero power to draw with the Mana Feeder and just overkilling the Kayn, I assume, with the Twin Slice off the top. It feels terrible, but I agree he absolutely needs either weapons or soul shards to get going. So the other argument you can make is for Wand Maker.
Yeah.
But because it doesn't give soul fragment generators, I prefer the Mana Feeder.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, the best you can get is like Twin Slice, just to throw down one of those to get more value. But instead, it's just kind of fighting for board here instead, I suppose. Okay. I guess going into turn 4, it's a little bit awkward if Flurry wants to equip the Marrow Slicer.
True. I guess Flurry has, in certain ways, a very similar problem to Alutemu. But he does have the Marrow Slicer into Lapidary Curve, so I think he's absolutely within his rights to start the face race.
And I think Alutemu here was really, really praying that he plays the Kayn, takes a value trade, and then something trades into his Kayn. He didn't care if it was the opposing Kayn, the face. He just wanted some indication that he wasn't dying this fast, and he would have been happy.
Oh no, not the philosophy.
The bad one.
And Alutemu for sure has to take this trade now because Blade Dance is too punishing, and also he's just dying quicker than Flurry. He will be the second one to equip Marrow Slicer. Oh. So this gets complicated for Flurry because at first glance this looks like a clean Shard Shatter turn, but he only has the one fragment in the deck right now.
So is it Soul Shear and then Shard Shatter? It's a massive overuse of resources, but it sets up for a guaranteed, or almost guaranteed, Lapidary on the next couple of turns.
It could be ignore everything altogether and just continue with the face game plan because he has Glaive Bound as a follow-up. But it's really difficult because then the Blade Dance will also be inactive if you use the Marrow Slicer charge. So he's going Shard Shatter without the Soul Shear, which I think I like the least. If you're going with this line, I like your suggestion of cashing in the Soul Shard.
Yeah, it's really close because there is also the argument of, you know, next turn you go for the Glaive Bound, and then turn 7 you can just go Soul Shear plus the Lapidary on the same turn. Like, there is still a curve here for Glory's play.
True.
It's just a little bit slower, I think, for sure.
Well, for Alutemu, almost certainly you have to play the Marrow Slicer here to start shuffling the fragments in. And he's Blade Dancing just to get rid of 1 minion. I think this is warranted because you're committed to a Militia the next turn. And so you just don't want to tank the 3.
Commit to Militia for 2 guys?
I mean, his hand does nothing else, right?
Yep.
It changes if he top decks a Blade Dance. But yeah, this is the... Okay. Still the Glaive Bound turn for Flurry. As you said, he still has sheer Lapidary.
Does mean I think that we technically saw missed damage from Flurry because he didn't swing with his hero power with the weapon on the previous turn. Obviously, it means that he could have had a 5 damage swing on this turn to clear off something and get the damage to face. So not necessarily a misplay, but just something to observe.
I think it's fine because he has double Blade Dance as well in hand. Like, we could have seen if Alutemu went wider on the board, just a deviation from the other curve.
Good point. Okay.
Yeah, 1 target Blade Dance. We're seeing it again, but I think it works perfectly with Flurry's hand. It's good recognition because he still has the second one and the Lapidary, so you just maximize the damage while minimizing the chance that he dies.
Yeah, I really, really like this play. The only alternative I was looking at was potentially ignoring it and just trying to set up 2-turn lethal here instead by going just Lapidary face and then go for Glaive Bound plus the weapon next turn, right? Was also a possibility.
Yes. I think he is just preparing for Eldraki on the other side.
That's
I
true.
think
That's
it's fine for Flurry to take a patient stance here because Alutemu has just had very slow development turn after turn.
I grow impatient.
And no way of healing.
So if you go Marrow Slicer, 3 Twin Slices plus a hero power, you get up to 11 damage on this turn, which means you need 10 next turn, which means...
So Soul Shard hero power.
Right. But he heals for 2. Yeah. So you technically have lethal if he has no attack buffs whatsoever, correct?
That's a great spot, because you still have the other second play.
But he has to play 1 Twin Slice here to have enough mana to be able to do that, correct?
Yes. It's difficult to say if that's the line or not, because if it's any attack buff on Flurry, then suddenly you wasted a bunch of Twin Slices. I think Alutemu here is just saying he needs his own Altraki to stay in the game, which is fair.
Oh, I don't know. I think he's kind of far enough behind here to the point where throwing down 1 Twin Slice on this turn feels worth it to me just for the chance to hit lethal on your opponent. Maybe they slip up. You know, it's not even necessarily that they don't have the damage. Maybe they go for a skull or something instead. It wouldn't have worked out.
I mean, you bring up a great point. It is very rare that you see Demon Hunter back into this kind of position where they only have that option.
Alright.
Could still be an Eldraki though.
Yeah, that's what we're praying for here for Alutemu's sake. Yikes. GG.
Yep. He can't get the Consume Magic into an outcast position to draw any further. That will be game 1 to Flurry. I think the most interesting decisions came in the mid-game there, just from the very first Pain trade. That already looked like a very different Demon Hunter mirror than what I'm used to seeing.
Indeed, yeah. And, you know, we did see Alutemu starved of the powerful cards, which was, you know, arguably to some extent because he didn't go with the line you were talking about, Panthara on turn 4 to draw extra cards, but he did go for that on the following turn. He was getting out all the card draw cards that he wanted to play over the course of the game. They just didn't come in a timely enough fashion. But even then, you know, the aggressive use of Blade Dance, which didn't necessarily have to come down, he could have saved that to answer the minions that come down on board on the following turns. It really was a complicated game, I think, and deceptively so. You know, a lot of dense decisions there that some casters might not be able to appreciate.
That is totally fair. From both these lists, I also want to note that they're not running Magtheridon, which I think ties in well to the Druid ban strategy. I really like that. I think leading up into this week, I wasn't seeing that much of the conquest logic,
Right.
or at least the logic that exclusively applies to conquest, of where you try to lean all of your deck's techs at least towards one good matchup, and then you remove the tech cards that are for the matchup that you're banning away, outside of, say, Chonsu's hard targeting. But we might be approaching finally a more refined way of building 4 decks to beat the other decks in this meta.
I think we are, and that's where the beauty of Conquest comes in. I really hope that we do get to see more of that soft targeting, hard targeting strategy that we saw from Chonsu in particular last week. But before we can see whether it goes all the way here for Flurry, we're going to have to go to a short break, and when we come back, the continuation of Alutemu versus Flurry. We'll see you in a minute.
指か7本の足か選ぶなら7本の足かな。ハーストーンができなくなるのがちょっと怖い。
应该是7只手指吧，因为这样就可以做比较多的事情。然后7个脚趾也不一定会走得比较快。
평소에 손이나 발 사용할 때도 손이 더 활용도가 더 많이 높은 것 같아서 네, 손을 선택했어요.
손가락을 많이 필요로 해본 적이 없어서 저는 오히려 그게 더 편하지 않을까 생각합니다.
아무래도 게임 좀 많이 하다 보니까 좀 더 유리할 거 아니에요? 게임 하는데 그래서 손가락 7개인 게 더 나을 것 같습니다.
どちらでもなくて腕を2本増やしたいです。
Welcome back to our first day of the week here at Hearthstone Grandmasters. Getting through the season here quite rapidly. We, of course, have 1 week left of the round robin after this one, where we will have decided who has been sadly relegated out of Grandmasters. Then we have the playoffs at the end in week 8 of our season. And then as a little bonus extra, not technically part of Grandmasters, we have Masters Tour Madrid to be thrown on at the end, which is a huge event in its own right, where we'll be finding out who will be joining us for next season of APAC Grandmasters, as well as all of the other regions as well. That'll be a lot of fun. Before any of that can happen, though, we're getting through Flurry versus Alutemu now, and with the Demon Hunter having lost for Alutemu now, he's just going to be straight up queuing it up again, Gia, into the Warrior, which is one of the matchups I was talking about at the start. Definitely feels not as bad for the Demon Hunter as I originally was thinking.
Right, you brought up a great point in that if you're not running the Risky Skipper Armorsmith package, it really lessens the amount of health gain that Warrior has access to. I will note, however, that Flurry is running an Ooze in his list, though, which could be a very big deal to snipe off one of those Marrow Slicers. We've also seen certain Demon Hunter lists that are running Horde Pillager, and Alutemu's is one of those in the place of Magnerodon.
Yeah, I think that will be helping in the matchup. Just any way that you can throw down extra damage. And also worth mentioning, you know, a 4/2 minion for 4 mana. If it's not met immediately with Sword and Board, as an example, to clear it off, that can connect. That's yet more damage, which I think has been the real kicker for the Demon Hunter in the matchup. If you can get any kind of minion presence, minion damage, punching face, you're just so far in the lead.
And in this particular matchup, you really begin to feel the importance of damage counting for the Demon Hunter, because while they do have tons of total damage, it's still very finite, whereas the Warrior can go into Galakrond mode and start to plunk out the damage a little bit faster. But the difference is that Bomb Warrior doesn't have access to when, or they don't have any say over when their big damage comes through, because you have to just kind of play the odds with the bombs in the deck. So I feel that Demon Hunter tends to be faster here and more of the aggressor.
Well, I mean, it's a great point to speak about Bomb Warrior's aggressive potential, because I agree completely that Demon Hunter does need to be the aggressor. But with this Aldraki Warblades here, the Bomb Warrior isn't going to be sitting there doing nothing for the whole game. Is there any consideration to holding on to it here because you want to heal up against all the weapon swings and the bomb damage later on?
Yeah, I think it's a very real possibility. I think my reason for not wanting to play it is because you don't really want to just overwrite it with the Marrow Slicer the next turn. And I think when you equip Marrow Slicer, you're absolutely going to swing one charge in immediately because of the threat of Ooze. And this technically from Alutemu allows him to fit in a hero power, which can be relevant later on.
Yeah, it's true. It's 1 extra damage. It also allows him to fit in Tempo Philosophy, a world first here, for literally 0 value. Obviously, I think just because he doesn't even want to get more of the Spirit Jailers once they come down, and just wants to make the Outcast positioning a little bit cleaner for turn 8, I suppose, with the Skull of Gul'dan.
Yeah, it is very, very sad for Alutemu there, because he is also just not running the list he had last week with the Penflingers and the Ultruist. So there's actually 0 reason to hold onto a card that doesn't do anything.
Very nice pickup, though, as I was saying, with the Horde Pillager here for Alutemu. The damage can keep on coming here, and just gear up for eventually getting down that Sociologist and then the Skull as well.
Both of them have this type of curve. However, for Alutemu, I'm sure he would much rather Soul Shear this Horde Pillager away.
Oh,
so
this
he
is
can connect the 4 to face. It's difficult.
So we also have to consider mana utilization is very important, because he really wants to be able to play Sociologist on 7, I think, no matter how bad it may be, just to unlock the Skull. And therefore, Soul Shear plus Aldraki Warblade doesn't sound that terrible to me, to be honest.
At first glance, it is the play that just makes your mana the smoothest, but it really interferes with his next turn because he wants to go Horde Pillager into re-equip specifically Marrow Slicer. So it's either you just give up a charge on the Warblades, or both charges possibly even.
Yeah, I mean, you can go Soulshare, swing, then equip the Warblades. Next turn, you swing with one charge of the Warblades, and then re-equip the Marrow Slicer with Horde Pillager. It does give up that healing potential I was talking about, which can be quite impactful. But the benefit that you get is better mana utilization and the ability to curve into Skull very cleanly.
That's true. I just didn't like the idea of re-equipping a 4-2 Marrow Slicer because of the ooze, but it is just a one-of in Flurry's list. In the end, Alutemu is just going for max damage output here. He doesn't feel scared enough to soul share away the Horde Pillager.
I wonder.
Which I can see the merits for. He is just going for Militia on 7, I suppose, and that will happen whether or not the next turn is Skull.
Indeed, yeah, and I was very potentially tunnel visioning in on Skull maybe a little bit too much, coming down specifically on turn 8, because you have to trust the top of your deck here for Alutemu, absolutely. Any draw of any draw of finding damage from hand, be it Lapidary or Glaive Bound, would be fantastic as well. And also, it could just straight up be a hard cast Skull for the non-outcast variant. If you find damage and you have the mana to spare, it doesn't matter if it's reduced or not.
That's true, but if it's hard cast, I don't want to see it before the Militia because of the possibility of drawing the Soul Fragments. I don't think any draw off the Skull changes the fact that you want to go Militia on 7. So I think it's still just going to be like hero power with Marrow Slicer and Soul Shear here. Like, he's floating a ton of mana throughout the entire game, but it's max damage output.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough.
Well, okay, he can still overwrite this with the Eldraki because that makes the turn 8 play smoother, like you were talking about. But Alutemu is
here.
all in.
Yeah, I think if this is the game plan, you follow through as much as possible. Pray that they don't have the armor gain, because, again, I was talking about the clunkiness of this build of Warrior against a pure damage build. Sword and Forward in hand, there's nothing to even play it on.
That's true. But it's getting scary for Alutemu now too, because Flurry has had mega weapon curve. 2 bombs still in the deck for Alutemu.
And this means straight up, despite a full board Sociologist Militia, a single bomb can close out the game.
Yeah. Oh! Dr. Boom! But then he can't clear the board, so that's the play for next turn. But is Flurry alive till next turn?
Bladestorm here is smart. Hero Power Shield Slam gets the... or even Sword and Board, even better.
Yeah. Very likely alive. Flurry is in a great spot. Alutemu needs Twin Slices to get this Eldraki big enough to deal him the significant breakpoint.
He's alive.
Oh, or Soul Shard Lapidary.
That is a mammoth draw here.
But he's still dead. Just boom Whirlwind. Nearly
Swing
every time.
Boom Whirlwind. Is it every time? It is every time, isn't it?
Nearly every time.
It's just every time, yeah. Fingers crossed for Alutemu.
What? Okay,
Yeah, he's dead.
Oh, didn't even need the swing.
Yep, nicely done there by Flurry. It was a kind of a straightforward game for Flurry, to be perfectly honest. We were obviously mainly focusing on Alutemu that game, because that mid game there were two paths he could have taken there. It was the skull focused route where you tempo out the Eldraki Warglaives, throw down the Militia on 7 no matter how good or bad it is, and then go for Skull. Or there is the pray that you get the good top decks off the top of your deck and just launch all the damage face that you possibly can this game. And he took the path that did not end up winning him the game. Whether or not the other one would have is obviously extremely debatable, but it's an unfortunate way to close things out.
Yeah, I think the Tempo Skull might have even had him die sooner because likelier to draw bombs at some point. And it could have changed the Militia on 7 play, to be very fair, because if he had picked up Twin Slices there, and given that Alutemu was at such a low health total, he probably deviates from the Militia plan. But I think Alutemu just very much recognized that his hand gave him the best shots to win through the aggressive game plan, and you just kind of, you know, take the loss if Flurry has an even more aggressive hand, which does happen sometimes. He didn't have room to make that much decisions because there were no ways to buff the Eldrazi.
Well, at the end of it all, it does mean that Flurry is 2-0 up here and just a single game away from going up to 3-1 in Division B, being in a much safer spot than we saw him in last season. Whereas Alutemu is a game away from going down to 1-3 in Division B. Obviously, so far from what we saw from him in the previous season. It would be heartbreaking if we were to see him relegated out of Grandmasters. I can't imagine Alutemu without it. But it's not over yet for him, both in this series and in the season as a whole. Up against the Rogue, he does have, I think it's arguable, 3 decent matchups here, because for you, I think this was the question mark in Flurry's lineup to go with this version of Rogue.
Right, because it seemed like, based on Flurry's other decks and their matchups across the board, it seems to be complemented better by Weapon Rogue. But it could very well be that Flurry just prefers this archetype. I would say that Secret Rogue is flexible enough of a deck that you can make a case for just playing it because it's your pet deck. I think you can get a huge edge on this archetype compared to Weapon Rogue, the more experience you have.
Ooh, spicy hand here for Alutemu right out of the gate, because even though I'm learning more and more, I think that this matchup is not that good for Mage. I think if they're both playing at a very high level, the Rogue does pull slightly into the lead. Against an explosive hand like this, the Mage can absolutely just steal a win.
Is this Coin Shanvala? Like, very likely active the next turn because Apprentice Magic Trick is 2 spells most of the time, and then Arcane Breath. No good targets.
I know.
I'm so tempted.
I'm trying to close my eyes from Flurry's hand and just not see the backstab and the eviscerate and the blackjack stunner. Like, he has both ways of dealing with it already available in hand. But I think the payoff is not necessarily worth the risk here for Alutemu, because on turn 4, he can get it down with the Apprentice. He'll very possibly have found Evocation, another cheap spell, maybe a Ray of Frost by then, and he will be able to get more activations, very likely.
Yeah, I think that is the discipline play for sure. And the other big point is that you can get it down on a turn when you're actually having good targets for the freezes that you're possibly getting off of the magic tricks.
Oh, big draw though.
Neophyte!
Yeah. This is a scary turn for Flurry here. Witchy Lackey plus Neophyte, that is a huge development onto the board. That's not bad.
Decent result too. I mean, this just slows Alutemu's entire game plan down by another turn, to the point where you probably even Arcane Breath the Cult Neophyte for fear of Shadow Step.
I guess so, yeah. I like it.
Getting another spell instead of the ping, I like it.
Blizzard, I think, is where you're at.
I agree. None of these are cheap enough to fit in with the next turn of Shanvala, so you probably just take the highest value one by that point to follow up the Shanvala turn.
The value doesn't stop here for Flurry. Looked like he was reaching for double Dirty Tricks there, which sadly does not, isn't allowed. Although I suppose that would be a Dirty Trick, quite thematically.
But Alutemu will be happy to know that that is not plagiarized, because that would have been the backbreaker for his play. And I don't think you can afford to play around it because he's taking too much damage by this point. Okay, but that is tempting.
You can go full greed mode. This is next level greedy.
Oh, but what if he'd...
What if it's not plagiarized, though? He just doesn't know.
He doesn't know. He lacks the critical information. It's so hard. I mean, you can make the argument for Cobalt Spellkin, but...
Right.
Then if it's not plagiarized, Flurry possibly has another turn to draw the plagiarized.
Yep.
I like
Problem with this way, though, the turn is more than half over, so he has to get moving here very, very quickly indeed. Frostbolt, not a bad pickup at all. Missiles, sign me up. That's another spell you can throw in.
Time runs out on me.
Oh, because he went coin first, I think he misses second Shanvala activation. But
Oh,
he needed to go
true.
coin first to give himself more information on whether or not it's plagiarized. Because if he didn't see dirty tricks go off, assuredly he was not going to pop off with Shinbala this turn. Could have just been a spell for the turn. So, the secret information is a whole 5/5 less for Alutemu here. Big deal.
Oh, just look at this turn though for Flurry. It's so clean.
Yeah,
Like,
that's backbreaking.
technically, the apprentice survives if you're just gonna like sap it back to hand, or even leave it in play, I suppose, as well. But it's just so strong. You always take this.
He sapped the 5/5.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Alutemu has just played basically all his spells, right?
Yep, it's a randomly generated spell and a card from his deck.
The Brotherhood shall prevail.
Oh, yikes. Okay.
Thanks, indeed. It's a good one. Oh, is he just going Shenvala again? That really likely doesn't work out.
He still doesn't know what the secret is.
Oh my god, you're right. You really don't want to give him Cobalt Spellkin, do you?
Flurry's secret package is 1 ambush, 2 dirty tricks, 2 plagiarize.
Oh!
Oh my gosh!
Oh!
Alutemu's in it. He's in it, and
He's
he knows
back
that
in.
the secret is not the scary one here.
He's way in it. He's in it to win it. Oh! Look at the side quest
playable.
as well. Both of them. They're insane.
Yep. Kind of wish you had 1 mana to spend on Learn Draconic here, but first world problems. Is he holding them for Shanvala? But then Elemental Allies doesn't go with Shanvala the way you want, right? I think you play the allies.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Now the plagiarizes are in hand. But this isn't the pop-off turn anymore. Could be.
Start with
I
the
was
mystery.
thinking maybe it's ambush there, just because Alutemu has these big clunky minions in hand.
That's true. That's true.
Obviously, with 2 of the same secret, to give yourself more flexibility, you'd rather play one of the duplicates.
Yeah, I think this hand on average just needs value. Like, unless you're hitting Draconic Lackey pretty much exactly, or I guess maybe Ethereal as the 1 out of 7, then you really do need a little bit of extra chance to hit something to do with your mana.
Actually, because he hit the double Titanics, which honestly don't line up great on this board, I thought it might still be ambush there at the end.
Right.
Or if he was gonna go double Titanic, I don't know why you wouldn't put them both on the first one, because 3/5 into 1/3 seems super clean.
This is starting to shape out, though, for Alutemu. He's not dead because he had the answer to Edwin. He gives Flurry a terrible card off of the Plagiarize, and next turn, Shenvala activates the side quest. 3 spells, Apprentice, Learn Draconic. This is an incredibly powerful turn coming up. He's just winning at the moment.
It really is.
So many options.
I just wonder about whether the ambush could have made a difference here. Obviously, it probably just
Maybe.
kills a 5/5, and then Alutemu's still in a good spot, but it's really slipping away from Flurry now. As long as we see the Plagiarize second one come down, just because it disincentivizes popping off next turn with the side quest completion, then I'm okay.
It's just so hard to know from Flurry's perspective. Like, from where you're sat, looking at just blank cards from your opponent, you know some of them, of course. Actually, you know, he knew 4 out of the cards in hand weren't cards in the deck, right? I was going to say it could be a huge giant or evocation turn, but it would have to come off the top.
Oh, is he playing Plagiarize or the 5/5? Obviously, mana says 5/5.
Yep.
But, and obviously it's still gonna be a little bit scary for Alutemu, but as soon as he plays Shanbala, he'll know that he's free to go for the pop-off.
It's Shenvala no matter what. You have to draw the spells from your deck here.
Right. decide afterward.
Or is it just me? You better
Right, now he knows he's free to pop off. Oh,
That's pretty good. That's a nice combo of cards.
that's perfect.
Okay.
Just can't spend mana on spells, so the Learn Draconic isn't working. Boo-hoo.
Reservoir, sure, sign me up.
Time runs out on me.
Oh! He's going
Yeah, you
for
just
it.
do it.
He's
You
going
just do
for
it.
it.
You have Shenvala. Oh my goodness.
That's another one activation? Only one because he doesn't have mana. Who cares? Whatever. You're drawing cards, you're making 5/5s, pulling miles ahead onto the board. Flurry needs to hit the passage, I think, to have any chance whatsoever. Whoa!
Oh, he had time for the giant. Man, Alutemu was a god. I was like, there's no way he had time to see this giant, right? He was at the very end of the rope.
This is a new Alutemu this season, I'm telling you. He's going full running in the 90s.
Runner, runner! That was a sight to behold.
Yeah, nicely done there by Alutemu. A very strong mage game. Fighting back against almost insurmountable odds and taking down the huge Edwin as the swing turn. And I think, you know, even though there's that weird little mid-game there where he missed an activation on Shenvala, because of the critical information which he was lacking, as you put it, it did mean he had to play around the possibility of plagiarize at all points. And I think he did that extremely well. He didn't give the value to Flurry, which meant he was just dead on cards at the end of the game.
I don't think it is wrong for him to expend the coin there.
Yeah.
Alutemu was saying, I would rather miss a 5/5 to make sure that I'm not giving Flurry the best possible combination of cards, because Flurry hardly had a hand at that point as well. And I think Alutemu 100% would have lost if he played that big turn into a plagiarize. But after he got the info from the coin usage, he was free to go for it. And later on was greatly rewarded. My only question for Flurry was whether that last turn, could he have found room to go for plagiarize? And the turn before that, could he have found room to go for ambush?
Yes, that's the big one, right? Because I was running through in my head from his perspective when he played the second plagiarize, maybe it's a big evocation turn, maybe it's a big giant turn that comes down. But when you start to run through it, you know, he knew there was a random spell in hand, a Shenvala, a 5/5. There aren't really all too many cards that it could have been at that
He
point.
knew there
to be
was side
punished
quest
by.
activation, right? Because
Right,
Shenvala
exactly.
for the second one.
Yeah, I think that's the big one. But either way, I do think that was maybe a slight chance to get into a better spot for Flurry. But either way, I do think he was going to be ending up losing that series just because of the power of Alutemu's draw and his ability to play around plagiarize. Again, though, it's the Rogue having a tough matchup. And weirdly enough, I think that was the hard one for Alutemu that he lined up first. He's now left with a couple of pretty good matchups. In my opinion, the Bomb Warrior and the Demon Hunter, neither runaway favorites against the Rogue, but if I had to choose either side, I'd choose the Bomb Warrior and the Demon Hunter both against the Rogue.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the Demon Hunter is a little bit closer because of just the one copy of Consume Magic, but it's good for Alutemu that he has that tech inclusion because obviously it's the tall minions that are a big threat here. Demon Hunter has very convenient ways of dealing with the Miscreant Lax type boards with Short Shatter Mystic. Ugh.
Correct.
Stab one thief just to get something on board.
So there's two things that this hand is saying to me. It's either just play out the cards on curve and say this is, you know, good enough, or it's trying to set up for some kind of a big swing turn, primarily through the secret passage that was just picked up. Because, you know, come turn 3 or 4 here, I think, you're potentially looking at just digging for Edwin and saying, I pray I hit it, because that's my best chance of winning the matchup.
That is very true. It's already looking like that could be the game plan here. Flurry also gained some information from Alutemu essentially passing turn 2 is that there's no one maker in his hand, which starts to make you think this is weapons, this is burst spells, and in some worlds, the minion development just gets swept up by Alutemu wanting to do something anyway.
So it does take still kind of a slow response here with just backstab coming down. And it doesn't really matter whether he develops onto the board or not because there's nothing coming down from Alutemu at all.
This is icky from both sides, but oh my goodness! Oh no, no, no! Okay. Uh-oh.
Yep. That'll do, Pig.
Is this a 14-14?
Imagine trying to count here, Gia. Brain has left the room, okay? This is no time for thinking.
Alutemu knows what's up. Okay,
imagine if it just ends with miscreant.
Consume magic, 2 1-makers in the deck.
Yeah. He has outs. It's not over.
This is just such a dream for Flurry. He even just gets value on top of the giant Edwin.
Yeah, secret there just to make your opponent's life a little bit harder. Oh, good job.
Oh no! Well,
is there any way he can survive 3 turns with like a massive Aldraki heal? He can heal for like
that's
10,
what I was
right?
thinking. But it doesn't seem like.
Yeah. Can he?
Obviously, you don't want to go Aldraki this turn because you don't want to overheal at all. I'm thinking it's Shard Shatter Hero Power into Aldraki slice into Aldraki slice. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
I just want to see the 3-2 come down this turn.
I think I agree with you. It's kind of tough though, right? Because if you go Eldraki this turn and don't swing, it allows you the mana to just play all 5, like 4 Twin Slices and a Hero Power next turn to heal up for maximum. I guess that's not necessary to survive, assuming they don't develop a huge board in addition to the Edwin.
Yeah, I think because you have two charges on Eldraki, it's fine to divide the Twin Slices across 2 turns.
Okay.
You should still be able to get max healing that way.
Although it's got to be said
the only question is the Horde Villager.
Right, yes. And also just the fact that turn 6 might be earmarked for Skull as well to try and find the Dispel magic as well.
True. Yeah, this Edwin is not going away. And so, also, Flurry picked up Spellbender, which messes with Consume Magic.
It does.
So,
yeah, that's true, actually.
You might be thinking, just get this down, because Alutemu top decking that is the only way he loses from this point.
Yeah, I think you're pretty much always playing that. It's just what you do in addition to it. Kobold, I think. That's more damage with this.
Turn 5, if you care. Probably don't care. I want the Kobold to go and eviscerate. Yeah.
We're playing Freeze Mage at this point. We don't care about developing stats. Oh. Neither does Flurry, I guess. A 0-6 taken instead.
That one's just bigger than a Pyroblast. Next iteration of Freeze Mage.
True.
Okay.
No soul fragments in the deck. Feels bad.
Well, he has to go for the Warblades. With 2 Twin Slice, I'd imagine. I don't see the merit in weaving in a Hero Power at this point. No, it's just not Counter Spell. Nor Netherwind Portal.
He's afraid of Vaporize, you don't really care. Ice Barrier, you don't really care. Flame Ward, you don't really care. Everything's just going face here.
Small consideration to trade the 3-2 into Edwin. Actually, no, that just puts it to 8. I was thinking if Blade Dance is your top deck, then you can go double Twin Size Hero Power to kill Edwin, but that's if it's at 7. It goes to 8 with this trade, so you're probably sending it face.
Right, yeah. I mean, if you get Chaos Strike into Blade Dance, that's the out, I suppose, to be able to clear if you trade.
Okay. Could very well be just don't attack altogether because Vaporize is no net gain for you.
Yeah, that's fair. So this is...
He's 1 off?
1 off as I count it. 5 plus 1 is 6, 20 damage. Okay.
Mirror?
Yeah, I'm looking at Mirror too.
Dagger down. Okay, sure. Plagiarize as well. Because if Alutemu wants to heal more, he needs Twin Slices. And if he gets Twin Slices, Alutemu's even more dead.
Miss. Miss. And miss.
GG.
Oh man, it breaks my heart, Gia. It's, again, another instance of a horrible way for Alutemu to go about. Another bad beat, a massive Edwin coming down on turn 3. There is nothing that you can do to stop that. You just have to eat it up from your opponent. And it does mean that while I can't really fault him at all for that last game, there's nothing you can do. Flurry is the victor and goes up 3-1 in Division B, getting himself further and further away from that danger zone down at the bottom, which Alutemu is getting more and more entrenched in right down at the bottom.
Yeah, 1-3 alongside Rivius. Alutemu does have one match to play this weekend, though, so still a chance of pulling a little bit farther away from the very bottom, but it does look very scary, and I would be really, really sad if Alutemu is one of the players we see go. I think he's one of the best that APAC has to offer, and it's just been, every time we've seen him on stream,